You want to know why I tell this story to anyone who will sit still long enough to hear it. Because I was there, not at the end, at the beginning. The part everyone forgets, the part where we were laughing. My name doesn't matter much anymore. They called me Malo when I served. Observer rank, third tier, attached to the Dominion fleet as a set of neutral eyes. My people, the Sithari, don't fight. We watch. We record. We sell what we record. That was the whole arrangement. The Khaor Dominion did the conquering, and someone like me sat in a quiet corner of the bridge and made sure the galaxy got an accurate account of who won and who didn't. I have made a lot of accounts in my life. This is the only one I have never been able to finish without my hands going cold. So listen, I'll tell it the way it happened, slow at first, because that's how it happened, slow and stupid and sure of itself. The Dominion found the human colony by accident. That's the truth, and it embarrasses the Khaor to admit it, so they've spent a long time pretending otherwise. But I was in the room. A survey drone drifting through an unclaimed spiral arm nobody had bothered to chart pinged something it shouldn't have. A heat signature, then 12, then a few hundred. A settlement on a world that wasn't supposed to have anyone on it. The planet was a little blue-green thing, third from a yellow sun, with two oceans and a long dry continent in the middle. The humans called it Brightwater, after the river that cut the colony in half. I learned that name later. At the time we just called it Target Senar 9, because that's the kind of people the Dominion were. Everything got a number before it got a name. I remember Sub-Commander Vrail leaning over the survey table and looking at the image of the colony. The little clustered roofs, the fields laid out in neat squares, the single tower with a dish on top reaching for the sky, and I remember exactly what he said. "Soft," he said, "look at them soft." And everyone on the bridge made the car sound for agreement, that low clicking in the back of the throat, and I made a note in my record. Subjects appear undefended, agricultural, pre-stellar military doctrine. I want you to understand something. We were not wrong about what we saw. We were wrong about what it meant. That is a different kind of mistake, and it is the kind that kills you. You have to know who the Khaor were, or this story doesn't land right. The Dominion had eaten 40 worlds in 200 years, not metaphorically. They arrived, they assessed, they extracted, and they moved on. Their fleets were beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, long dark hulls with edges that caught the light. Their soldiers were tall, four-armed, armored in chitin they grew themselves. They did not negotiate. They did not warn. They had stopped bothering to warn anyone a long time ago, because warning implies the other side might do something about it, and no one ever did. The whole galaxy had a quiet arrangement with the Khaor. Stay small, stay useful, stay out of the way. My own people had survived 3,000 years by being too boring to conquer. We made records. Everyone needs records. So they let us live and they let us watch, and in exchange we never, ever said the thing that everyone was thinking, which was, one day they will run out of small worlds and then they will come for the rest of us. Humans had no such arrangement. Humans didn't know the Khaor existed. They had crossed the dark on a slow ship. I saw the wreck of it later, a long battered tube of metal that should never have survived the journey, and somehow it had, and they had landed on this empty blue-green world, and they had started, of all things, building. That was the part the Khaor never understood. The humans weren't hiding, they were settling. They thought the dark was empty. They had planted crops and dug wells and put up a school. There were children. I saw the children later too. I'm getting to it. The point is, they didn't know. They had no idea what was coming. And the Khaor decided, the way they decided everything, in about the time it takes to swallow. Take it. We arrived over Brightwater on the morning of what the humans would have called a market day. I know that because of the records I made. I have watched the footage so many times the edges are worn soft in my memory. It was a clear morning. 2 of the humans' moons were still up, pale against the blue. There was a haze of cookfare smoke over the eastern quarter. People were moving in the square, small figures with their 2 arms and their upright walk, carrying baskets, leading animals, doing the ordinary work of being alive on a morning when nothing was wrong yet. The Dominion ship came down out of the sun. That was deliberate. The Khaor liked to come down out of the sun, so the first thing a world saw of them was a shadow swallowing the light. We hung over the colony, 3 kilometers of dark hull, and the engines made a sound that I am told humans feel in their teeth before they hear it. And down there in the square, the little figures stopped. I watched them stop. I watched them tilt their heads back. I have replayed that moment more than any other because it is the last moment in the whole story when I still believed I knew what I was watching. A primitive people seeing a god for the first time. Fear, awe, the beginning of surrender. That's what I expected. That's what always happened. What actually happened was that one of them, a tall human in a brown coat standing near a well in the center of the square, turned and started shouting. Not running, shouting. And the others didn't scatter like prey. They moved, fast with purpose in directions that meant something. The children vanished first, pulled into buildings by adults who didn't pause to look up again. Within a minute the square was clearing, and the clearing wasn't panic. It was a drill. These people had a drill for the sky going dark. I made a note. I remember the exact words because I went back and read them 100 times afterward, trying to understand why I hadn't paid more attention to my own hand. Subjects respond to threat with coordinated dispersal. No observable command structure visible from orbit. Possible prior contact with hostile force. Reevaluate undefended classification. I showed it to Vrail. He read it. He clicked. He told me to stop being timid, that frightened animals also run in patterns, and that a pattern of running was still a pattern of running. I deleted the question mark from my note. I am not proud of that, but I want to be honest with you because that's the only thing that makes telling this worth anything. I deleted the question mark, and I told myself he was probably right, and I sat back down in my quiet corner to watch the Khaor do what the Khaor did. The first wave was a landing party. 200 soldiers dropped in armored pods along the river with 3 of the big walkers for show. The Khaor always sent walkers to a soft target. The walkers weren't for fighting. They were for crushing. They were for the picture. They wanted the survivors to remember the legs. The humans met them at the river. Now I have to slow down here, because what I'm about to tell you sounds like a boast, and I hate the way humans boast about this part like it was glory. It wasn't glory. I was watching through 12 different lenses and there was nothing glorious about it. It was the most frightening thing I had ever seen, and I have seen the Dominion burn cities. The humans had no walkers. They had no armor that mattered. Their weapons were chemical and crude projectile throwers, and a few energy lances they'd clearly built themselves from salvaged parts. By every measure the Dominion used to weigh a fight, the humans had already lost before the pods touched the ground. And they fought anyway. That was the first thing. They didn't fight because they thought they could win. I am certain of this now. They fought because there were children behind them in the buildings, and the only thing between the children and the Khaor was the river and a few hundred farmers with farm tools and rage. So they stood at the river, and they did not run. And when the pods cracked open and the soldiers came out, the humans were already shooting. The Khaor lost 11 soldiers in the first 90 seconds. I want you to understand how impossible that number was. In 40 conquered worlds, the Khaor had lost soldiers, of course they had, but never like this, never this fast, never to a population that wasn't supposed to be a population at all. 11 dead in 90 seconds to farmers. On the bridge, the clicking stopped. That's the detail I always remember. The Khaor are never quiet. There's always that low background of clicks, the sound of 200 people agreeing with each other about how the universe works. And when the casualty count came up on the display, all of it stopped at once, like someone had closed a door. Vrail leaned in toward the screen. His mandibles had gone very still. Again, he said, he thought it was an error. Run the count again. It wasn't an error. The fighting at the river lasted 4 hours. 4 hours. For a colony of maybe 3,000 people against a Dominion landing force with a warship overhead. By any law of war the galaxy understood, it should have lasted 4 minutes. The humans gave ground slowly. They fell back through the colony building by building, and every building cost the Khaor blood. They had prepared the ground. I realized that watching it, the slow horror of understanding that the neat squares of fields, the careful streets, the placement of the wells, none of it was only farming. They had built a place that could be defended. They had thought about the sky going dark, maybe not the Khaor specifically. But they had crossed the empty dark in a slow ship, knowing it might not be empty, and some part of them had never stopped watching the horizon. I keep coming back to the man in the brown coat, the one who shouted first. I picked him out again and again in the footage because he kept appearing where the fighting was worst, not leading from the front in the way the Khaor commanders did, all display and distance, but moving through it, pulling wounded back, putting himself in gaps. At one point, a walker came down a street toward a building I could see was full of people. I could see the heat of them through the walls, and this one human, this single small figure, stood in the street in front of the walker and did something to it. I never found out exactly what. He had something in his hands. The walker took 2 more steps and then it came apart from the inside in a way the Khaor engineers spent the next year unable to explain. The man was thrown 30 meters by it. He got up. He was limping. He got up and he kept moving. I named him in my private record. I wasn't supposed to name targets. I named him anyway. I called him the Standing Man because in 4 hours of footage he was the thing I kept finding still on its feet. I found out his real name much later when there were memorials, when the humans put up the names of everyone who held the river that day. His name was Thomas Hale. He had been a well driller. He had 2 daughters. They were in the building behind him. He held the street for 19 minutes. By the end of the 4th hour, the Dominion had taken Brightwater. I want to be precise because the humans and the Khaor remember this differently, and I am the only one who was watching from the middle. The Dominion took the colony. That part is true. They took it the way you take something by setting most of it on fire and stepping on what's left. By the end there were maybe 400 humans still alive, pushed back into the colony's deep storage cellars, the ones they dug for the hard winters. The Khaor controlled the surface. They controlled the sky. They had won, by their own definition of the word. They had also lost 340 soldiers, 2 of the 3 walkers, and something they could not name and would not discuss. I was in the room when Vrail made the decision that ended the Dominion. He stood at the survey table with the casualty list glowing in front of him, and his soldiers were waiting for the order to go down into the cellars and finish it, and I watched him weigh the only 2 choices a Khaor commander ever weighed. Finish them or use them. Extermination or extraction. There was no third option in the Dominion's whole way of thinking. There was no door marked leave. He could have left. I think about that more than anything. 340 dead, a colony in ruins, a survey arm nobody had charted. He could have logged it as a hard world pulled out, and the galaxy would have gone on exactly as it was. The Khaor on top, everyone else small. Humans a footnote in a record only I would ever read. But you don't lose 340 soldiers to farmers and then walk away. Not if you're Khaor. Not if your whole power is built on the idea that no one can hurt you. Walking away would have been an admission, and an admission was the one thing the Dominion could not survive. So he chose the third thing, the thing the Khaor always chose when a world hurt them more than expected. He decided to make an example. I need to tell you what making an example meant, because the humans use that phrase now like it's a footnote, and it wasn't a footnote. It was the hinge the whole galaxy turned on. The Khaor took the 400 survivors out of the cellars. They didn't kill them. That would have been mercy by Dominion standards, and the Dominion was past mercy. They took the survivors, the wounded, the old, the children, what was left of the people who had held the river, and they loaded them onto the warship. And then they broadcast it. That was the part that mattered. That was the part that ended them, though no one on the bridge understood it yet. The Khaor sent out a transmission, on every band, in every language they had a code for, to every small world that had ever made the quiet arrangement to stay out of the way. They showed the burning colony. They showed the captives in the hold. And Vrail himself, 4 arms folded, spoke the message the Dominion had spoken in one form or another for 200 years. This is what resistance buys you. This is the price of the sky going dark and you not bowing. Witness Brightwater, remember it, stay small. They were so proud of it. I remember the clicking came back when the transmission went out, that low, satisfied sound. The universe restored to its proper shape. The humans had hurt them badly. But the Khaor had the captives, and the Khaor had the message, and the Khaor were going to turn a disaster into the most effective piece of fear they'd produced in a generation. I made my record. I sent it to the neutral archives the way I always did. An accurate account, 41st World, heavy resistance, colony pacified, captives taken, example made. And then I added a line that was not part of my job, a line I have never regretted. The only honest thing in the whole official account. The aggressor has identified this species as prey. The aggressor is mistaken. This observer does not know yet how badly. I didn't know why I wrote it. Call it instinct. Call it the look on Tomas Hale's face in the moment before the walker came apart. Not fear, not even anger, just a kind of terrible patience. The look of someone who has done the math and knows the cost and is going to pay it anyway and wants you to know he chose it. I had seen 40 worlds bow. I had never seen a face like that. The transmission reached Earth 11 days later. I didn't know that at the time. None of us did. The Khaor didn't even know where Earth was. They had the colony, but the slow ship had wandered, and the humans, it turned out, had been very careful about not leaving a clear trail home. The Dominion assumed the colony was the whole of them, a lost seedling, a few thousand strays. They had no idea there was a home. I have spent a long time imagining what those 11 days were like on the other end. The signal crossing the dark, arriving. Some human technician, somewhere, picking up a transmission in a language a machine had to crack. And then the machine cracking it, and the images resolving. And a colony they had lost contact with 3 years before appearing on a screen on fire, with a 4-armed creature folding its arms and explaining slowly, for the benefit of every small world listening, exactly what had been done to Tomas Hale's daughters and why. The Khaor sent that message to make the galaxy afraid. It reached the one audience in the galaxy it should never have reached, and it did not make them afraid. I have studied a great many species, in a great many records, and I will tell you the thing I have learned that the Khaor died not knowing. There is a kind of creature that does not get more careful when you hurt it. It gets more focused. For 3 months, nothing happened. This is the part the storytellers leave out because nothing is hard to make exciting, but it matters, so I'll tell it. For 3 months after Brightwater, the galaxy was exactly as it had always been. The Khaor went back to their patrols. The captives were processed into Dominion labor. The transmission did its work. I logged the responses myself, world after world going quiet, the small powers pulling in their heads, the message landing exactly as intended. Stay small. Stay useful. Stay out of the way. I was reassigned to a different fleet. I kept my private record of Brightwater closed and didn't open it. I told myself the strange feeling I'd had was an observer's nerves, nothing more. 41 worlds, the Khaor on top. The shape of the universe restored. And then, on a routine patrol at the edge of the same uncharted arm where it had all started, a Dominion picket ship sent one transmission and went silent. I wasn't there for that part, but I read the transmission later. Everyone read it later. It became the most studied 17 seconds in the archive, and I'll tell you what it said in order, because the order is the whole story. First contact, unknown vessels, count, rising. Then count, rising, configuration unfamiliar, requesting identification. Then they are not answering, they are not slowing. Then the last thing, and the picket commander's voice on it does something no car voice was ever supposed to do. It climbs, it breaks. Why are there so many of them? And then nothing. The car had assumed Brightwater was the whole of humanity, a few thousand strays on a lost world. It was not the whole of humanity. It was barely the edge of it. I'm going to stop part 1 here on purpose, on the threshold, because what came through that uncharted arm next was not a fleet the way the car understood fleets, and the galaxy that watched it happen was never the same shape again. That's where part 2 picks up. The retaliation. What Earth actually sent, and what it did, and the moment the entire galaxy, every small world that had stayed quiet, every power that had made the arrangement, understood at once that the thing they'd been afraid of for 200 years had just been replaced by something else. And I'll tell you what happened to the 400 captives, and to Vrail, and what the humans did that no one expected, the thing that actually shocked the galaxy, which was not the violence. Everyone expected the violence by then. It was the other thing they did after. I'll get to it. I told you the picket ship's last words climbed and broke. Why are there so many of them? I have thought about that line for the rest of my life, because it isn't a battle report. It's the sound of a whole way of understanding the universe coming apart in real time. The car had a word for everyone else, prey, and the entire architecture of the Dominion rested on the assumption that prey came in small, manageable numbers, and that fear was a thing you applied to it like pressure, and that under pressure it bowed. The humans had taken the pressure. And they had not bowed, they had counted. Let me tell you what came through the uncharted arm, because I was reassigned back to the front the moment the picket went dark. Every observer was, the Dominion suddenly very interested in an accurate account, and so I saw it arrive. It did not look like a war fleet. That was the first wrong thing. The car built their ships like blades, all edge and threat, because half of conquering is the picture. The human ships had no picture. They were ugly, blunt, functional in a way that was almost insulting, slabs and cylinders and ungainly angles, hulls scarred and patched, painted in colors that meant nothing, no banners, no display. They looked like things that had been used, like tools somebody picked up because there was work to do. There were a great many of them. I logged the count as it came in, and I stopped logging it after a while because the number stopped meaning anything. The Khaor doctrine assumed a species' military strength scaled with its population in a known ratio. The humans broke the ratio. It was as if the entire species had decided all at once that everything else could wait. And here is the thing I keep trying to make people understand, because it's the part that should have frightened the galaxy more than the numbers. The humans did not arrive angry. I had expected fire, vengeance. The car expected it too. They were braced for a screaming charge, the kind of reckless fury that you could bleed and break and outlast. That's what the river had taught them to expect. Soft creatures with too much rage. What came instead was quiet, methodical, terribly, terribly patient. They did not broadcast threats. They did not fold their arms and explain. They sent one transmission, and I have it memorized, and it was not addressed to the Dominion at all. It was addressed to the captives. We know where you are. We are coming. Hold on. That was all. No warning to the car. No demand. The Dominion had built 200 years of power on being the voice that explained the price of resistance, and the humans simply did not engage with that voice. They talked past it. They talked to their own people in the hold, 11 light-years away, as if the entire Dominion fleet between them and that hold were a matter of logistics, a thing to be moved through. I remember Vrail. They'd put him in command of the response, his disgrace from Brightwater apparently a thing he was meant to redeem. I remember him hearing that transmission and not understanding it. He kept waiting for the threat, for the term he could negotiate or refuse. There wasn't one. The humans hadn't come to make him do anything. They'd come to take their people back, and his existence was simply in the way of that, the way weather is in the way. You cannot negotiate with weather. The battle for the arm lasted 6 days. I am not going to give you the glory version because there wasn't one, and because the humans themselves have never told it as glory. I have sat with human veterans of those 6 days. They let me, eventually, once the war was old enough to talk about, and not one of them ever smiled telling it. They told it the way you tell a thing you survived. Flatly, with long pauses. What I can tell you is what it looked like from the middle, from a neutral ship with 12 lenses, watching 2 ways of thinking collide. The car fought for advantage, always. Every car maneuver was about position, about leverage, about forcing the enemy into a shape where surrender was the only sane choice, because the car assumed sanity meant surrender, eventually, for everyone. That assumption was the engine of their entire war-making. The humans did not appear to want advantage. They wanted forward. Every formation, every loss, every brutal exchange, it all moved in one direction, toward the system where the captives were held. The car would open a gap, a beautiful trap, the kind that had folded 40 fleets, and the humans would pour into it and take losses that should have broken them and come out the far side closer. They were not trying to win the battle. They were trying to reach a hold full of 400 people, and they treated the destruction of the Dominion fleet as a step on the way, not a goal. There's a thing that happens to a predator when it realizes the thing it's hunting isn't running and isn't bargaining, and isn't even really looking at it. When it realizes it has been recategorized, in the prey's mind, from a threat into an obstacle. I watched it happen to the car over 6 days. I watched the clicking on the bridges go from confident, to uncertain, to silent, to a sound I had never heard a car make, a kind of low, broken stutter that their own physiology was apparently capable of, and had simply never needed before. It was fear, real fear, the thing they had spent 200 years installing in everyone else, finally arriving home. On the 5th day, Vrail tried to use the captives. This is the part I have the hardest time telling. He put them on every band, the 400, the same broadcast trick that had worked at Brightwater, turned around, come no closer or these die. The oldest move in the Dominion book. Leverage. The assumption underneath it, the assumption underneath everything the car had ever done, was that the humans valued those 400 lives more than they valued the destruction of their enemy, and that this could be made into a lever, and that the lever could move them. I watched the human fleet receive that transmission. They did not slow. I need you to understand that I am not telling you they didn't care. I made the mistake at the time of writing in my record that the humans had shown they did not value the captives, and a human veteran read that line years later and put it down very gently and looked at me for a long time and said, "No, we slowed for nothing because slowing would have killed them slower. We were the only thing that could reach them. Stopping was the one way to guarantee they died." They had done the math. The same math Tomas Hale did in the street in front of the walker. The cost was known and it was unbearable, and they were going to pay it anyway because every other path led somewhere worse. And so they did not slow, and the not slowing was not coldness. It was the most terrible kind of love I have ever had to record, the kind that keeps moving toward you precisely because it cannot afford to stop and grieve yet. Vrail did not understand it. To the very end, he was waiting for the lever to catch. It never caught. There was nothing in the human fleet for the lever to grip. He had built his whole strategy on the idea that fear was universal and that everyone, pushed hard enough, would bow. And he had picked the one species in the galaxy that had already been pushed that hard, at a river on a market morning, and had answered by counting. They reached the hold on the 6th day. I won't pretend I saw the inside of it. The fighting at the end was close and ugly, and my lenses could only catch the outside. The human boarding craft locking onto the Dominion flagship, the breach, the long, terrible quiet while everyone in the galaxy who was listening held their breath. The car had 400 hostages and a flagship, and the last real strength they had left, and the humans went in on foot to get their people. The way they defended the river on foot, because some things you cannot do from a distance. What I can tell you is what came out. They got them, most of them. Not all Vrail had begun the thing he threatened in the last hours, and there are names on the Brightwater memorial that never came home. But most. I watched the human craft pull away from the dying flagship with the survivors aboard, the old and the wounded and the children, the people who had held a river on a morning when the sky went dark and had been told, by every law the galaxy understood, that no one was coming. Someone had come. That was the thing. That was the whole thing. The galaxy had a rule older than the car that no one comes. You stay small and you stay quiet because when the sky goes dark, you are alone. Everyone knows you are alone. Being alone is the price of the arrangement. 40 worlds had learned it. My own people had built 3,000 years of survival on it. And the humans crossed the dark, against the entire Dominion fleet, taking losses that should have ended them. For 400 people on a colony most of them had never seen. And in doing it they broke the oldest rule in the galaxy, which was not a rule about war at all. It was the rule that said no one comes. Now the retaliation, the part the title promises. I'll give it to you straight because the humans never dressed it up and neither will I. When the captives were safe, the human fleet did not withdraw. It turned and it went into the Dominion. Not to conquer. This is the thing the galaxy got wrong for years, the thing that took even me a long time to understand. The Khaor expected conquest, because conquest was the only thing they knew how to do or fear. They expected the humans to become them, to take the worlds, to install the fear, to fold their arms and explain the new price. They almost wanted it at the end. It would have made sense. It would have meant the universe still worked the way they understood. The humans did not conquer the Dominion. They dismantled it. There's a difference, and the difference is everything. They went world to world, and they did not raise human banners, and they did not extract, and they did not install themselves on top. They took apart the thing that did the conquering, the fleets, the command, the machinery of fear. And at every world they reached, they did the one thing no conqueror in the history of the galaxy had ever done. They freed it and they left. I was at 3 of those worlds. I watched it 3 times and I did not believe it any of the 3. A human ship would arrive over some Dominion holding, some broken, extracted world full of people who had made the arrangement, who had stayed small, who were braced for a new master, and the humans would break the Khaor grip and open the labor camps, and then they would go. No occupation, no tribute, no price. They would leave behind the wrecked machinery of the Dominion and a transmission, and the transmission, every time, said almost the same plain thing. You're not theirs anymore, you're not ours either, you're yours, good luck. That is what shocked the galaxy, not the war. By the end everyone expected the war. The galaxy had seen the human fleet move through the Dominion like weather, and it had braced, all of it, every small world for the new boot, because that was the only ending the galaxy knew how to imagine. Someone wins, someone rules, the shape stays the same, only the face on top changes. The humans didn't take the top. They knocked the top off and walked away and left the galaxy standing there, blinking, free, and absolutely terrified, because a power that could have ruled everything and chose not to is a far stranger and far more frightening thing than a Khaor. The Khaor you understood. The Khaor wanted what everyone wants. The humans had crossed the dark, broken the unbreakable, and wanted nothing but their people back and to be left alone, and that was a kind of power no one in the galaxy had a category for. You can make an arrangement with someone who wants to rule you. There's nothing to negotiate with someone who simply will not be ruled and will not rule, and who will come across any distance, against any odds, if you touch one of their own. Every small world in the galaxy understood the same thing at the same moment, the way I understood it watching Tomas Hale get up off the street. The arrangement was over. The 200-year arrangement, stay small, stay quiet, no one comes, gone, not replaced with a new master. replaced with a question nobody had been allowed to ask in 200 years. What would you build if you weren't afraid? I should tell you what happened to Vrail, because people always ask. He survived the flagship. The humans took him not as a trophy, not for execution, which is what the Khaor would have done and what Vrail himself fully expected and I think almost wanted, because it would have meant he still mattered enough to kill. They didn't kill him. They put him on trial in front of the freed worlds, and they made him sit and listen while the survivors of Brightwater said the names. All the names. The ones who came home and the ones who didn't. Tomas Hale's daughters were there. They had come home. They sat in the front, two small humans, and they said their father's name out loud in a room full of the people he died in front of, and Vrail had to hear it. That was the sentence. He'd spent his life making examples, turning people into a message to frighten the small. They turned him into an audience. They made him listen. For a creature whose entire culture was built on being the one who explains the price, being made to sit silent and hear the cost named back to him, one name at a time, by the children he tried to use as a lever, I think that was worse than anything they could have done to his body. I observed him afterward. He never made the clicking sound again. I don't know if he couldn't or wouldn't. He lived a long time, quiet. I'm old now by my people's measure. I've outlived the Dominion and most of the people who fought it. I still keep records, old habit, and every so often a young one, human or Sithari, or from one of the dozens of worlds that figured out after the arrangement broke that they could build something, asks me why I tell this story so often, when there are bigger battles in the archive, longer wars, grander fleets. I tell them it's because of the morning. The market morning. The clear sky, the two pale moons, the cookfire smoke, the small figures in the square doing the ordinary work of being alive. That's the part I can't get out of my memory, and it's the part that matters most, and the storytellers always rush past it to get to the fleets. Because the galaxy spent 200 years believing strength was the dark hull coming down out of the sun. The picture, the fear, the folded arms and the explained price. And the truth, the thing I learned watching a well driller stand in a street in front of a walker with his daughters behind him. The thing the whole galaxy learned 11 light years and 3 months and 6 days later, is that the strongest thing in the universe was never the ship that comes down out of the sun. It was the small figures in the square who don't run. It was the ones who, when the sky goes dark, turn toward each other instead of away. Who built a place that could be defended on a world they thought was empty, just in case. Who crossed an entire ocean of dark, against everything, for 400 people and one broken promise that someone, somewhere, would come. The Khaor attacked a human colony to teach the galaxy that no one comes. And the humans crossed the dark to teach it the only lesson that ever mattered. Someone comes. Hold on. Someone always comes.